name is Grace, and you're listening to the Homebody Podcast. Welcome, everybody. My guest today is Amelia Hruby, who is a longtime guest friend of the podcast, also producer of the podcast. And for those of you who are new to the show, Amelia Hruby is a feminist writer, podcaster, and a producer with a PhD in philosophy. And she's the founder of Softer Sounds Podcast Studio, the host of Off the Grid, which is a podcast about leaving social media without losing all your clients. And she has a new book out this fall of 2025, called Your Attention is Sacred Except on Social Media, which is serving as the building block for how we're orienting our conversation today. So welcome, Amelia. It's nice to have you back on the podcast.
Hi, Grace. It's so nice to be here with you. And, we just recently recorded for my show as well. And I'm really loving being back in conversation after kind of a hiatus. We did a lot together for a few years and then kind of had the past year of some more quiet time where our friendship, I was going to say went into incognito mode, but I just mean it stopped being so public. But now we're back.
Totally. I think it was I had to have some time to not be in public for a while. Yeah. Our first conversation on the podcast was actually about your first book back in 2020. And now you're back again with book number 2. And would you like to share a little bit for our listeners some of how your life and perspectives have changed since book number 1 and book number 2, and sort of how you feel like you're arriving with this new book baby in your hand?
I really appreciate this question because it's something I've wanted to reflect more on as well, realizing that my second book came out 5 years, almost to the day, after my first book's traditional release. So, every creative journey is a winding journey, and mine has been as well. I don't think there's a linear artist's path out there. No matter how many times we all try to do the artist's way, it's not linear. For me, my first book was called 50 Feminist Mantras, and it started as basically a content series, a creative series on Instagram that I called Feminist Mantra Monday. And I wrote a sort of feminist mantra or affirmation every Monday for a year. And then after a year, I compiled them into a self-published book. And it taught me a bit of the magic of what a book is. And that book became even more magical when it was bought by a traditional publisher completely out of the blue over a year later. I was not promoting the book. I did not query agents or publishers. I was actually crowdfunding my podcast on Kickstarter, and an editor found it and was like, "Is this book just on your website? Can I look at it?" and I was at first like, "Are you a real person? Let me Google you. Is this a scam?" But she was, and it became a pretty beautiful relationship. And so 50 Feminist Mantras came out with Andrews McMeel in October 2020. And yes, that was sort of the origin point of our very first conversation and the opening into our friendship. And fast forward 5 years, and my second book, Your Attention is Sacred Except on Social Media, just came out in October 2025. And the process of bringing this book to life was both similar and different. I created my podcast, Off the Grid, where I've had over 100 conversations now about the role that social media and digital platforms and big tech play in our lives and how that impacts our creative practices and our online businesses. And the integration of that podcast practice was the book again. And I think that it's a very different book because I made it through a podcast versus making it through an Instagram series. My first book was an illustrated journal. It was all short and sweet and to the point and very evocative and reflective. This book is a philosophical and spiritual manifesto. It has a clear argument. I am trying to say something, not just ask questions the way I was in my first book, I would say. And some of that comes from the secret third book that I wrote in between these books, which was my dissertation, which is how I got my PhD. And all of that has integrated into this new book. So I feel like I'll pause there and just sit with the sort of paths that these books have had and how they're similar and different, and how I'm similar and different 5 years later.
Yeah, I would say some other things that feel really big changes, even just from the outside looking in, is that you've started a business since you wrote your first book. You've moved since you wrote your first book. Like you've had a lot of external shapes and life changes. And it's interesting to me that your first book was a compilation of things that you made on Instagram, and your second book is fuck Instagram.
Very accurate, yes.
Do you want to say more about some of that jump journey?
Yeah, I always like to begin by saying that you were one of the people who inspired me to leave social media, because in the fall of 2020, on this here podcast, you created an episode called Your Deep Alignment is a Portal, and you shared why you were leaving Instagram. And I really took that in, like in a very open-hearted, like it went deep into me kind of way, which I think is how everyone should listen to your podcast episodes. That episode broke open something in me that once it was broken, I couldn't unsee it. There was no putting it back together. And so that started me on this path of leaving social media entirely. And I announced in early 2021 that I was going to exit my Instagram. For me, it was a big deal because I had sold my first book on Instagram. I had built a small, like tiny, tiny business around it. I had invested a lot of my self worth, my identity construction, as well as my creative work and creative instruction was all happening on Instagram. And so leaving meant I really had to transmute who I was, both as a person and a creator or an artist. It all got wrapped up in that. And so I logged out of Instagram for the last time in April of 2021. And then I started my podcast Off the Grid about a year later. And it resonated more than I ever could have expected. I think that the seed of that resonance was in the episode you created. And I feel like I really felt that. And then sort of planted it in my own ecosystem. And it became this whole body of work now that is Off the Grid. And eventually became Your Attention is Sacred. And it's been such a different process to launch a book without social media than it was to launch a book with one. I will say I love it so much more this time, even though it's also been fraught with stress and fear and challenging feelings. But I'm so much more present with the book I wrote. I'm more present with the process of sharing and selling it. And I feel like part of the reason the formats of the book is so different, I think, is because my thinking was scaffolded in a certain way based on the platforms I was developing that thinking and creative practice on. So again, the book I wrote mostly on Instagram was evocative, reflective, open-ended. And the book I've written now that I'm off of Instagram it's longer, it's much more in depth. It's still evocative, but it feels so different. Like the whole texture and format and depth of it is different. And I think that has to do with being off social media for almost 5 years now.
Yeah, I mean, you pointed to two things that I think are sort of side effects of attempting to recover and rebuild your attention. One of which is, uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, many
That's
of
a
them.
side effect because a lot of what can become a compulsion on any level, but I think a really common one that we see in this day and age is sort of the scrolling as a distraction from uncomfortable feelings that are personal. And then we can sort of lose ourselves in things that are usually uncomfortable as well, but they're someone else's problems ultimately. And also, another side effect is you have the ability to create something that's a little bit more straight from your own voice as it is right now and really listen to the shape and the texture of what it wants to be without as much noise from the outside, as much static informing what other people think it should be. Which I think it's important to bring in other people's perspectives at certain points, but usually not as much and not nearly as early as we think in the creative process. I don't know if those side effects slash benefits feel like they land for you, but that's what I notice from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I feel like I'm coming into fuller form. I don't necessarily want to say faster, but definitely on my own timeline in a way where when I was on social media, like this evolution wouldn't even have been possible. I was spread so thin across like everybody else's opinions of what mattered. But yes, I would agree. I think that when you quiet the noise, you can really hear your own voice and voices for the first time, or again for the first time in a long time. And what that means is your like crystal clear creative voice can come through. And also the voices that you hold that are not so nice and that maybe are very critical or questioning or unsure, they can speak up as well. And I think that learning to be with myself, stay with myself, listen to myself has been a really important practice. And it's one that when I was on social media, I was just escaping it all the time. I never really had to be with myself. I didn't have to listen to myself because I could listen to all these other people instead. Or if I had an uncomfortable feeling, like you're saying, I didn't have to deal with my uncomfortable feeling. I could just go look at somebody else's like super vulnerable share and be like, okay, let me fixate on their uncomfortable feeling instead of mine. But what I've found now is an ability at least to be with more of the uncomfortable feelings. And over time, they can alchemize. They can really become art or pleasure, or sometimes they become despair or like much harder things that actually need to be grappled with. It's not just that, like, oh, I got off social media and my insecurities became my favorite things about myself. It's not like a rosy picture necessarily, but it helped me face the things I really needed to look at. And that process has been so bountiful, or in many ways.
I'm remembering now as you were talking that the original membership that I made that was very close to when I got off of social media was called Kin. And I remember the very first class I dropped in there was on attention. I don't remember the entirety of the class, but I remember basically the first thing I say in the first line of that class is we can't literally do anything unless you have a grasp on your attention. So until this happens, like there isn't a lot we can do. Like magic wise, spiritual wise, creative wise, like unless your attention is yours in some capacity and you know where it is and what it feels like and how to access it, then we can't do a whole lot. So this is baseline ground zero. I still stand by that. That still rings very true. And yeah, a lot of times we're wanting to show up to transformation in the sort of the quick fix way without having to take full possession of ourselves, including the parts of ourselves that we're not huge fans of. But that is the thing that we must do if we want the fruit of that journey. Like we don't get to skip it. And if you don't have attention, you can't even look at the map.
I feel like this taps into something that I learned from you and Ken, and I think was part of the first conversation we had on Off the Grid, which is about energetic sovereignty. And I think that reclaiming your attention or calling your energy back, which I think are somewhat similar things, as said in different words, is essential, both for art making, for accessing deep creativity, being able to create and generate from your own well, and also for transformation, for healing. We have to be able to orient ourselves in the world. And I think that's a lot of what attention is. It's knowing where we want to share ourselves, put our energy, spend our time, bring into ourselves. Something I talk about in my book is I like that I like to define attention just as the process of like choosing what we tend to. I like to break the word down from attention to attend to tend to. Attention is about what we tend to. And if we are not intentional in what we tend to, we actually can't transform. We can't heal. We can't create deeply resonant work. Instead, I think we end up reacting, responding, collaging other people's ideas together. And it's not that any of that is bad. I like a lot of that stuff. It's good to react to things happening in your life sometimes. It's cool to make a collage. Like, I'm not trying to diminish those things, but I know listeners of this podcast want more. And attention is crucial for that.
So you started off the grid really rooted in this journey and this transition. And what I hear, because on this podcast and in my work, while it has mostly transformational soul work, spiritual, sensual undertones to it, it also has a lot of like highly creative, visionary, entrepreneurial people who are building their own boxes that they work in. And pretty much everyone I hear is wondering, do I have to be on social media if I have a business? I mean, it's everywhere. It's like the only reason that they're still on it is because they think they have to be. And I love directing them to your work. I'm like, there's a whole podcast about how that isn't true. And I'm wondering how you've heard or witnessed that conversation evolve over the past couple years since you started off the grid, based on, how listeners are asking different questions, how it's being met with different kinds of receptivity. Like, I guess, what are the difference you've noticed in people's journeys? And also, I'm assuming that that's also paired with what's made way for this book and how they're now the receivers. They can even have the capacity to receive some of what you've written about it.
I think that when I left social media, people thought it was either like a totally outlandish decision or a very silly choice I was making. And again, I followed you off. So you were like out ahead of the curve even from me, but we were definitely out there like.
Let me just, for the record, I am great for outlandish decisions. I had a friend say recently we were doing a performance together and she was like, "You make strong choices." Like, that's a great way to say it.
Yeah, you make strong choices. And I've said this to you before, but I feel like you had a podcast before everybody else was doing it. You left social media before everyone else was doing it. And again, something in that podcast episode you made plugged into me and I was like, now is the time. I agree. It's time. So when I say we here, I mean you and I. Like, I think when we left social media, people did not get it. They were like, really? I clearly remember one person who like commented on a post and was like, "Love this for you. We'll see you back in 3 to 6 months." And I was like, okay.
You do not know a Capricorn rising when you meet one.
Yeah, exactly. I not only make strong choices, but then I commit to them.
There is a mountain between us now, bitch. There's no going back.
Exactly. I'm on the other side of this mountain. Sorry, can't hear you. Just the faint echo from where you're hanging out. But yeah, so it very much felt like, though, the response I got was skepticism. People didn't really think this was possible. And over the past 4 years, that has changed. And now the response I tend to get is a combination of like hope and envy. It's people who really do want to believe it's possible because they're realizing that like social media is not tenable for them at all. And I think this is actually like thinking of your beloved homebody listeners, like the like embodied somatic spiritual priestesses of the world. Social media was never for them. They're like, I'm sorry, you expect me to put this on this? No. And so I love that because they or you often hold the tools to like, how do we spread the word about our work without being on social media? How do we not deny or limit ourselves to this platform that's obviously created by charlatans, as it is, or as we have very much learned as we see what's happening inside of Meta or X or ByteDance. And so I encounter people who've never been on social media and find Off the Grid, and they're like, yes, other people who are doing it this way. Those are the folks who feel a lot of hope and possibility in this shift. And then I also encounter people who feel, again, it's like that sort of sense of, I don't believe this is possible for me. How could this be true if everybody says it's the other way? Everybody says you have to be on social media if you want to have a business or just like a social life. I get that a lot too. Like, how will I ever know what events are happening if I'm not on social media, if I can't RSVP on the Facebook pages, if I can't look at the stories of the various accounts that collect these things? And so I think that I've really noticed that shift from skepticism to desire. We're really moving into a place where people want to get off of these platforms, like deeply, truly want it. And now Off the Grid has become like a site of modeling that possibility. And I think that had I written this book 5 years ago, it never would have landed. Like people would have been like, what are you talking about? Even talking about attention wasn't that popular 5 years ago. And now everybody's talking about it. I literally this week have blurbed 2 other books about attention coming out in the first half of this year. Like it's very much a popular topic. So that's really what I'm noticing, the move from skepticism to desire. And I'm happy that more people are making this journey.
What do you feel like is the main thing that people need to understand? Because I think something that's really hard for people, and I see this in my own work as well in a different way, it's hard for people to really imagine the extent of what is possible on the other side of a transformation. And usually quite a lot is possible. Like a lot can really open up. And it's hard for people to imagine past the immediate symptom of, I actually just hate being on this. What do you feel like people need to understand? The people that you really see make a desired transformation, getting off social media, running their business, loving their business. What's the thing that they really get about their attention? Maybe it's something that comes up on your podcast or something that's in this new book that other people could benefit from. What's the shortcut link here if people are able to make it?
Most people have to release their fear. Some people can't let themselves feel the fear. They actually can't be in touch with how bad they're feeling on social media. They have repressed it and forced it down and looked away from it for a really long time because they felt like they have to stay committed to those platforms, to those metrics, to those practices of posting and sharing and liking and commenting and subscribing. But for the folks who can surface the like, I don't like this, I don't want to do this, often what stands between them and actually leaving a platform or making that change is fear. And what they ask me for through that fear is a guarantee that if they leave, nothing will change. And what I tell them is if they leave, everything will change and it will be great.
How can I change without changing? You're like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's very much that. And people want all of the safety with no surrender. They want me to assure them and ensure for them that they can just stay perfectly safe and comfortable every step of the way of this change, and that their actions will not impact the outcome of what they get. And one, I don't think that's possible.
Literally, that's not how literally anything in life works.
It's not. But it's like the promise of meritocracy, and it's a promise of a lot of the paved paths to success in our society, right? They don't work.
I feel like it's also what living a primarily digital drone life will get you. If you're used to spending your time and attention in ways that you're not invested in, actually, they don't ask anything of you except that you stay there and you keep looking at things that don't require you to be anyone or become anyone or do anything. Well, that's what you've been trained to be. And that's what you've been trained to do and expect. Like, it is very safe to do things that ask nothing of you except to zone out and look at other people's problems.
I like that language of digital drone. The other thing coming up for me there is like, social media turns all of us into bots. Like they just want us to be little robotic, liking, commenting, subscribing machines. And like you said, if nothing expects anything of you, if you don't expect anything of it and it doesn't expect anything of you in return, there's no stakes.
Well,
And
there's
I
no
think,
relation, like people who work in the material world. I think about my husband, who's always a contrast here. He works in construction. Like that idea of a request from life would never cross his mind because like he works with gravity. So, and sharp things and things that can go very wrong and weather. So it's like this way that kind of reality and request or desire for change can only happen from interfacing with this kind of technology.
yes, exactly. Because what I was thinking is if there's no stakes, then nothing really happens or changes. And that's what I'm hearing what you're saying is like material reality has stakes and it has laws like gravity and
And it isn't inherently safe.
it is not. And I think that there's such a way that if you're very online, if you're on social media a lot, you get wrapped in this algorithmic bubble of what feels like safety, but I would not actually call safety. It just feels like sameness, and the sameness feels like safety to you. That to me is a symptom of supremacy culture writ large. So I guess I think a lot of my work is just like helping people take off that algorithmic bubble. It's like peeling the bubble wrap off and being like, okay, now what are you going to make? Now what are you going to share? Now who are we going to put this in front of? Or who is this for? Is it just for you? That's beautiful. Is it for your local community? Amazing. Is it for the bookstore down the block? Like there's so many ways we can start to think of our creative practice, whether that be I grow a garden or I run a business, like or I make a painting or I make a dance or whatever the creation might be. I think that we have to re-embed it in a different context. And in some of these examples, that context is the material world, right? A construction business is always just embedded in the place where the buildings is happening. If your work is primarily online, like mine, I had to find different homes. Like I didn't, embed my business where I live locally, but I put it on my website and my podcast feeds and in other communities. And I built it on a web of relationships, which is what you were also bringing in before, of people I actually know and could call, not just folks I hope like something I've made.
Yeah, I'm seeing it much, much more common now. And I heard someone recently saying that it actually like isn't a massive mystery. Like all the things that you do to run your business are things you do to run your business. You just don't do that one part.
Exactly. I would
Yeah.
agree. Like, I sometimes don't know how I'm still talking about social media because I haven't been on it in so long. And like, it doesn't occur to me to do any of that social media stuff. Like, it's just kind of gone from my frame of reference.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like coming to it from someone who, I interact with people in a really different way in my work, but you can tell when someone's field and someone's questions are coming from a more like collective panic than it is from like their own being. It's like I can tell that this question is not actually your question. This is not the thing that's coming up for you, isn't actually your thing that you're really wanting to transform. It's just something that's made its way, it's just immersed itself in your field. And I think attention is part of what is a bigger field of our presence. And with your book, what are some of the core arcs or threads that you want to take people on as far as reclaiming their attention? You mentioned earlier this is part of the zeitgeist right now. Why now? Why is this transformation having its moment? And how's your book a
Yeah.
part of that?
I'm tracking this on kind of a number of levels. Like, there's a reason that I wrote the book this year. And there are other reasons that I think the zeitgeist is all about attention this year. And it's been interesting to see how those intersect and how they don't. So, what I want for readers of the book, and I wrote a bit about this before it came out, is like, I really want this book to be a sort of aha moment. This is like the light bulb going off. This is like, I am taking the blindfold off and I am looking at what is really happening with my attention and with social media right now. I am not hiding from it anymore. And as a former academic and as someone who has a Gemini moon and some other very intellectual natal placements, it's helping people have that breakthrough with ideas, for sure. I am not a somatic practitioner. I am not a spiritual practitioner. I think there are many ways that you can have a breakthrough. My book is a big ideas breakthrough. And the arc I want to take people on, essentially, there are 3 arcs because there are 3 chapters. The first chapter is called Against the Attention Economy. It's the reclamation of your attention through the recognition that it's not an economic resource. It's not scarce. It's not a commodity. Your attention is none of those things. Your attention is your sacred aperture to your life. And it's yours. And it's abundant. And it's expansive. And it's quantum. And I think that we have to start there. We have to reclaim what we think attention is before we can then go through the second chapter where I talk about algorithms. And I basically walk people through, here are all the ways that algorithms fuck with your attention. Like, let's get really clear here. Here's what you think is happening on social media. Here's what's actually happening. And I try to offer some ways where I'm like, if you're going to stay on the platforms, here's how I recommend sort of alleviating some of the impact that they have on your attention. However, I also think that if you want to really reclaim your agency, you're going to have to step back or away from social media in a meaningful way. And then once we've sort of had those realizations about attention and about extractive algorithms, then I offer the third chapter, which is about cultivating your attention like a garden. Because I found that anywhere that we're using an economic model that's become problematic, which in our capitalist society, most economic models are pulling in things like scarcity and extraction and just really harmful either practices or metaphors. But if we can shift from an economic model to an ecological model, we can often just begin that healing process. We can start to see like, oh, how do I think of this differently? How do I interact differently? How do I behave differently? How do I be differently? If we move from that economic context to the ecological context. So that's what the third chapter is about. It's like, stop doing the attention economy. Start cultivating your attentive ecology. Those are the arcs of the book. And the reason I think it matters right now, I actually see it not as like a contribution to the zeitgeist of attention, but as an interjection to that zeitgeist. Because the books coming out about attention this year that I've read have all been about the attention economy. And they say what it is and why it's a problem. And then they offer nothing else. And that's kind of the whole thing. And what I tried to do is really root out, like, I'm sorry, but this is a fundamental problem at the heart of the attention economy. Like, in its formulation, they got it wrong. And if we reject that premise, we can actually change things for ourselves and our communities. And that's sort of what I wanted to do with the book.
When I'm kind of reinserting this back into sort of like the elements and voices that like I stand on for my work, it's like if you are able to reclaim and cultivate your attention, energy, presence, vertical plane antenna, then you can really touch anything from a sovereign place. And I think because what's happening on a mass scale right now is that so few people have access to even one of those things, that nothing can be touched with any sort of intention, much less the attention of a gardener. And I really love that you're bringing all of these ecological frameworks to even help us have a different story in a different way that we even speak about what it is we're actually working with, right? If we only talk about the attention economy in economical terms, we're not actually coming up with a different story that would position ourselves and how we understand ourselves and what we have access to in any sort of new way. And I think that's something that's really important to do to, again, help ground people in this story is actually something that could be possible, how you relate to yourself, how you tend to your life. It's like feeding a different vision, which I think is really beautiful, using completely different language and terms, just like what is usually necessary when you're feeding the vision. You're like, here's the map of the other world, and they wear these clothes here and they have these fairy names, and it's now that like, ecological language is like starting to feel like that again. And you're like teasing that out and bringing it forward for this next chapter.
Yeah, I really appreciate that reflection. And it's helping me realize that a framework is a story, it is a vision. I think that there are a lot of books out there that will teach you like very specific practices for reclaiming your attention from social media, right? Like there are a lot of books that'll tell you how to do a digital detox. There are a lot of books that will tell you to go for a walk every day for 90 days to fix your attention. Like there are a lot of sort of tactical books in this realm. And I think the reason I call it a manifesto, which it says a manifesto on the cover of the book, is because I'm trying to present that different vision. And I do offer some practical suggestions. Like there are some reflection questions. I talk about doing an attention audit and some other things. But really, yeah, I wanted this book to be a different vision. And that's what I'm hoping for it because I've just felt so frustrated by the lack of vision that I see when people talk about attention. They talk about attention like it's something that the world is taking away from us. Like social media is taking our attention, politics is taking our attention. And like we need to be like grasping it and holding it closer. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? Like attention is like an abundant outpouring of our life into life. And like it's not something to be gripped or grasped or hoarded in that way. I think that was my initial clue that it wasn't economical. I was like, this doesn't function this way. This is incorrect. And so, yeah, that's at the heart of trying to cultivate this new vision.
Yeah, no one's making you click the thing. It's designed to make you want to, but like you're the one with the phone, click, no one's taking shit from you here. Which, again, if we want to have any kind of meaningful transformation in our life as ground zero, that has to be something that we're willing to take responsibility for. I don't know if I made a podcast with this title, but I feel like it's been sprinkling itself in everywhere where self-sovereignty is self-responsibility. Like the more you are responsible for with yourself, the more you can be sovereign over. End of story. It's not like I bought a crown and now I'm wearing it and people do what I like. It's like, no, you have a kingdom. You are the last straw. You are responsible for it, whether you accidentally shot the neighbor's horse or not. Like if you're king, you're the one holding the court for the kingdom. And the more we cultivate that level of relationship between sovereignty and responsibility for our attention, for our presence, for ourself, the more sovereign we are. And the more we can cultivate and the more stories we can see, the more access to ourselves we get. And then we realize like, well, I'm actually kind of really good at transformation. Oh, I'm kind of a boss actually, which is how that trajectory goes. You don't get that without the other thing first.
Yeah, absolutely. Like none of us are inevitable victims of social media. Like that's just not the case. And I like to be very gentle with people, but your listeners can handle it. Like, if you don't want to be on social media, get off social media. There's nothing actually keeping you there except stories you're telling about it and probably fear you have around leaving. Yes, if you leave, you might have to transform your life. Yes, if you leave, you might have to transform your work. But if you feel that pull to leave and you don't, it will be detrimental to your life and your work. So if you need somebody to tell you to get off of social media, here I am. If you want to leave, leave. If you don't care about leaving,
enjoy. Yeah, if you're having a great time and it's working for you, like by all means, like I'm not here to ruin anybody's party. But if the exchange is what you're really looking for, whether or not people actually leave social media or not, if what they're really looking for is more of their own sovereignty and attention, they're wanting more of their own energy back, regardless of what they end up doing on the outside. That internal reclamation is going to serve you regardless of what you do on the outside. And your attention's a big part of that.
If you want to make any big transformation in your life, no matter what it is, stepping back from social media can be a supportive part of that process because it clears out the noise, it clears out the static. It is an act of reclaiming your attention. Even if it's not the ultimate transformation that you're looking toward, I think it is a supportive step along the path to any meaningful or radical change.
If there's no spaciousness, there is no transformation, or the transformation will feel like trauma because you had no space for it. It'll feel like you just got like ripped in half. And it's like, well, it could have just been a change. But if there's no space, that's not usually how we feel with transformation. So,
yeah, if there's no spaciousness, there is no space to transform. And if the transformation comes for you when there's no space, it really might feel like trauma and like getting ripped apart. Yeah, I'm just repeating you, but I needed to say it back to myself to really hear it today.
That's a thought experiment I've been working with as goggles for the past few years, and I have yet to see that not feel true. Yeah. Is there anything else about your book, the little seedling that it is, and what you want it to grow from it? Is there anything that you feel like that's in there that you want to invite listeners to engage with or know about that I haven't really made space for while we're talking together?
One of the shifts that I make in the book is helping us shift from talking about attention as paying attention to talking about it as giving attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not the first person to invent this shift, obviously. Many people have said this. However, I think that in the context of how we talk about the attention economy, really reckoning with how transactional it is to pay attention is beneficial. And then also when you start to think of it and speak about it as giving attention, that's an act of taking your sovereignty back because it makes attention a choice rooted in trust, not a transaction rooted in lack or fear. And so I think that it has been a really big shift for me that I've undertaken since the process of writing the book. It's been very meaningful. It's really landing with early readers who are taking a lot from that. And I think it's a nice opening into the book. And if that idea really lands with you and you're like, oh, okay, that is something I want to explore more, then all the ideas in the book will probably land as well or offer more seeds for thought.
Yeah, it makes me think too, since a lot of the people who listen to the show and like participate in my work are creators of some kind, whether that's primarily as an artist and or business owner. It's like, what are the formats and the ways that we're asking people to pay attention or to give us their attention? What are the ways, how are we able to receive that? What are the outlets that we allow people to be in relationship with us with their attention? And I find with my work, a lot of times I'm challenging people's attention, even just like in the format of ceremony calls. It's like people are used to getting on a call and having like, here's the 10-minute intro with like the bullet points of what we're going to do. And I'm like, that's not what we're going to do. You're going to have to be all the way present the whole time and not knowing what we're going to do next. We're on Zoom, right? Nothing incredibly wild. Like there are limits to what you can get off the call at any time. But there's ways that I feel like I'm always playing with and getting creative with because I'm being aware of what I'm asking of someone's attention and how that might open up something for them a little bit differently, whether it's how I structure a meditation or how I create a course, like, or how is they going to listen to it or are they going to watch it? For someone else, it might be, is this an Instagram post or is this a podcast episode? For instance, for me, when I was leaving social media, it was like, I mostly just want to make podcast episodes because I feel like that's how what I have to say lands the best. And so I think what you're saying about the giving of the attention and us as creators is how we are receiving or creating spaces for others to be in relationship with their attention, that we can get really creative and excited and have fun with the ways that we're inviting people to do that.
Yeah. I mean, as a podcaster and business owner, I think a lot about how I ask for attention or request attention and how I receive attention. Like you're saying, like, every marketing email is a bid for attention in a transactional marketplace. And like, do I want to do it that way? I don't know. Sometimes maybe that's the paradigm I'm working in. Other times not. One of my favorite things that you've done, Grace, is when you made an audio sales page, I think, for Ma in the early days. And I think that is like a direct interjection in how people normally request attention when they're selling something, right? Like we're taught to make sales pages that are both very skimmable and very persuasive. And like pressing play and listen, like actually listening to an audio clip that you're going to have to give your attention to know what you're buying, like that's very different. It's a very different mode of attention in that moment. But it also helps people land in the right place to actually come into your work, which I think is important for all of us, but perhaps especially for the work you're doing now and sharing now. And so, yeah, I think there are so many avenues that open up. Like once we work through reclaiming our personal attention, and I should say there, like, it's not a perfect process. Like, it's not like I go through life only giving my attention to the things I want to give it to, right? Like, I still get flat tires. I still pay taxes. Like, you have to do stuff with your attention that isn't just your, like, blissful choice all the time. But once you've reclaimed it and you've reckoned with that, then you can go to these sort of other levels of, okay, now I know how I'm giving attention, but how am I requesting attention? How am I receiving attention? I've had moments with my work where it got way more attention than I was ready to receive or wanted to receive and had to deal with that. I've had moments where I didn't receive as much attention as I wanted, not to quantify it, but I've gotten attention, like hyper-focused attention from one person that I was like, oh, too much. And then lack of it. Like there's so many ways we can receive attention too. So I love what you're bringing in. It's giving attention, but also requesting attention, receiving attention. There's so many ways that we can wrap this in as creative people and practitioners who are sharing our work privately or publicly.
And, when we're creating, it's like, how can I make this episode or this conversation or this email or this meditation be something that is a gift to be in relationship with? If someone chooses, like, I want to give my attention to this, what are they receiving from it as well? So that they just get to engage with that inherent reciprocity with how presence works. Because I think attention is part of our presence. I don't think it's the whole thing, but I think attention is a really big component of it. And it's its own reward. Having the sovereignty of our presence, the awareness of our presence, like cultivating those parts of ourselves, whether we're changing a diaper or a tire or cooking something or, doing something we love or something that we don't love, having that full access or that more full access to ourselves, like, is its own reward. And so it's worth doing regardless of what the task on the outside is. If you're staying on Instagram and you're making a post, like, how can your post be the thing that's going to help people receive something from their attention? If you're going to send a newsletter, like whatever the thing is that you're going to do, if they're going to read your book, which I'm sure will invite them into massive amounts of softening and understanding and a really beautiful vision for how they could be relating to these parts of themselves. And I can't recommend your podcast highly enough. I send people to it all the time because it comes up so much. And if you want the beautiful boss Capricorn to walk you through the homework that you need to do, if you genuinely desire and it feels in alignment for you to like take a break from social media, or you want to get off of it, but you're a business owner and you're scared, and or you don't actually know what tools to use besides that, what parts of your business you could be focusing on instead, how to relationship network, and like all of the things from the practical to the ideological. I feel like it's such a great resource, and people should definitely go out and buy your book and definitely subscribe to Off the Grid. And it would just behoove them so much. And is there anything else that you feel like you'd like to leave us with? Any invitations, perspectives, or things that feel like they want to land at the end?
The last thing I want to say here, which feels very connected to Ma for me, and I'd love to know if you think it's connected, but I think it is, is that I think that many people teach the path of reclaiming your attention as one of a discipline. And I have found it to be much easier to take it as a path of pleasure. When I step into pleasuring my attention, it's very easy to pull it back from social media. In fact, I have found, at least, when I try to force myself off the apps with detoxes and screen times and everything else, it never quite worked. And so stepping toward things I want has always felt easier than forcing myself away from things I think I shouldn't be doing. And those sorts of pleasure practices are some of the things I see you teaching in Ma, and that I think are really important. And opening a deeper relationship to pleasure is a way of opening a deeper relationship to presence, which is what attention is all about.
I was telling someone recently that I was like, well, I've personally found that if I'm not really disciplined about something, that I don't actually desire it. Because if I really want something, I fucking do it, So
And it's not because you're making yourself do it,
no,
but
like if
because
I
you're
really
just
want
doing
to do
it.
it, I'm just going to do it. And if I'm not actually, quote, disciplined around it, then I don't actually want the thing that it's going to give me, or I don't think that I do. So yeah, so that tracks for sure. Where can people find out more about you, get obsessed with you on the internet, which you're so good at, learn more about the interweb? Tell us all the things where people should get obsessed with you and buy your things.
Yeah, you already very kindly spoke about the book and about Off the Grid podcast. You can find both of those things at offthegrid.fun. And while you're there, if you enjoy the book and or the podcast, I also have a membership program called The Interweb, which you can join. We have monthly calls. We have a community Slack work and play space and a library of resources that are all about stepping back from social media, cultivating creative practices, building a relationship with your intuition so you can make business and creative decisions from a different place. Grace has some teachings in there as well. So yeah, you can join the interweb at offthegrid.fun/interweb. And that's where you'll also find the podcast, the book, my free resources. It's all there.
I loved having you on, and I'm always excited for any chance to talk with you in public or not. And thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I love you. I love this. I love us.
Me too. Yay. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a few moments to subscribe to the show, leave us a review, and share the episode. These small tasks help our independent podcast so much. Be sure to also check out the show notes below to learn more about any resources, guests, or sponsors that we shared with you today. Our intro and outro music was created by artists Aaron Palovic and Jared Kelly. Our podcast logo was created by Elaine Stevenson, and this show is produced by Softer Sound Studio. Thank you for being here. Be well. Peace.